anchored by the deep friendship between our people. This relationship, which, with good reason, we and our predecessors have long called special, has made us safer and stronger through the generations.
Breaking news that's shaking the world to its core. King Charles collapses after shocking revelations that threaten to unravel everything. In a jaw-dropping twist, Donald Trump has just exposed Princess Diana's hidden letter to the public, one that could change everything we thought we knew about the royal family. Secrets, betrayal, and heartbreak. This explosive letter reveals more than anyone could have ever imagined. How will the monarchy recover from this devastating blow?
Preserving the glory and unique character of this kingdom, restoring life to the rivers and streams, supporting the works of its artists and composers, planting trees and gardens in its countryside. And I just visited one of the most beautiful I've ever seen that you just completed.
The announcement came as a shock to the public. It was an event no one had expected, least of all Buckingham Palace. Former President Donald Trump, during a state visit to the UK in 2025, unveiled a long hidden letter from Princess Diana, one that had remained sealed for decades. The letter, addressed to Trump, was penned during the turbulent years of the 1990s, a time when Diana's life was under intense public scrutiny and personal distress. Trump, who had met Diana during his earlier business ventures, had kept the letter in his private collection, but now, in a stunning move, he chose to expose it to the world. The letter was a deeply personal correspondence, providing insight into the private thoughts of a woman who had long been the subject of public fascination. Diana, the people's princess, had always been open with the public about her struggles, but this letter offered a rare, more intimate glimpse into her world. It was written during a period marked by personal crises, including her separation from Prince Charles and the ongoing media frenzy surrounding her every move. Diana had never intended for this letter to be seen by anyone but Trump. Yet, through his decision to reveal it, her words were about to become public knowledge. The contents of the letter were, to say the least, explosive. It contained candid reflections on her marriage, her role within the royal family, and the immense pressure she felt as a member of the British monarchy. Diana spoke of her struggles with isolation, her desire to break free from the constraints placed upon her by the royal institution, and her hopes for a future outside the rigid expectations of the crown. The tone of the letter was raw and emotional, giving a rare look into the internal battles she faced behind the public image. In the letter, Diana also made several references to the people in her life, some of whom would become key figures in the media frenzy that followed her tragic death. Among those mentioned were her ex-husband, Prince Charles, whom she described as emotionally distant and increasingly consumed by his own duties. She also spoke of her love for her two sons, William and Harry, and the pain she felt in being unable to fully protect them from the pressures of royal life. But perhaps most startling was the mention of certain events that had been long speculated about, but never confirmed. Diana spoke of a growing sense of betrayal she felt within the royal family, an institution that she had always been expected to represent, despite her increasing disillusionment with it. She expressed frustration at the lack of support she received from those around her, particularly as her marriage to Charles fell apart in the public eye. These revelations would go on to fuel more questions about her time as a member of the royal family and the true extent of her unhappiness within it. Trump's decision to release the letter came at a time when the British royal family was already facing its own set of challenges. King Charles, who had recently ascended to the throne, had been under increasing pressure as a result of his past actions, his relationship with Camilla, and his perceived inability to fully unify the monarchy. This new revelation was the latest in a string of public controversies that had threatened to overshadow his reign before it had truly begun. The timing of Trump's decision to make the letter public added an additional layer of complexity to an already delicate situation. The letter's exposure immediately sent shockwaves through the media. News outlets around the world picked up the story, with some focusing on the contents of the letter itself, while others speculated about Trump's motives for revealing it. Was this an act of goodwill? A chance for the public to gain insight into one of the most iconic figures in modern history? Or was it a calculated move to further fuel the growing divide within the royal family and damage the public image of King Charles and Camilla? As the letter's contents began to spread, public reaction was mixed. For many, this was a long-awaited opportunity to hear Diana's voice once more, to understand her side of the story in her own words. Fans of Diana, particularly those who had followed her since her marriage to Charles, were eager to hear her thoughts on the events that had defined her life. Others, however, were more skeptical. They questioned the ethics of revealing such a personal letter, especially when its contents could be seen as an attack on the royal family. Inside the palace, reactions were less than favorable. Sources close to King Charles reported that the monarch was deeply shaken by the public unveiling of his ex-wife's words. He had always struggled with the pressure of living up to the legacy of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and now, with this letter in the public domain, the weight of Diana's words threatened to overshadow his own reign. Charles was said to have retreated from public view, spending time in private meetings with advisors and officials to discuss how best to manage the fallout from the letter's release. The response from Camilla, now queen consort, was similarly subdued. While the public had long speculated about her role in Diana's marriage and her relationship with Charles, this new revelation only served to further stoke the flames of controversy. Camilla, who had been married to Charles during the later years of his marriage to Diana, found herself once again at the center of public scrutiny. The letter, with its candid references to her husband's emotional distance and his role in Diana's pain, added another layer of complexity to her already fraught position within the royal family. As the story continued to unfold, the media speculated about the potential long-term effects of this new revelation. Could this letter, now exposed to the world, become the catalyst for further division within the royal family? Would it have a lasting impact on King Charles's reign? And perhaps most importantly, how would the British public, who had long been divided over the monarchy's future, react to this unprecedented move by Trump? In the coming days, the letter would continue to dominate headlines, with analysts and royal experts providing commentary on its significance. For some, it was a glimpse into the life of one of the most beloved figures of the 20th century. For others, it was a damaging revelation that would only serve to weaken the monarchy's standing in the eyes of the public. As the story developed, it became clear that the consequences of Trump's decision to expose Diana's letter were far-reaching. The royal family, already struggling with internal divisions and public discontent, now faced yet another challenge: the fallout from a letter that had been hidden for so long, but now had the power to redefine the legacy of both Diana and the monarchy itself. As news of Donald Trump's exposure of Diana's hidden letter spread across the world, the fallout was swift and intense. The media frenzy that followed quickly overshadowed any other royal events, as the letter's contents continued to dominate headlines and capture the attention of the global public. What started as a private act by the former U.S. president had quickly spiraled into an international scandal that reached far beyond the palace gates. The question on everyone's mind: why had Trump decided to release the letter now? And what were the wider implications for the monarchy? Inside Buckingham Palace, the initial shock of the letter's release gave way to a sense of urgency and anxiety. The royal family had always maintained a careful distance from personal matters, especially those tied to Princess Diana. Her tragic death had left a deep scar in the hearts of many, and her legacy had been carefully curated by both the palace and the media. Diana's untimely death had transformed her into a martyr of sorts, an image of a woman whose life was marked by love, loss, and public persecution. For the royal family, her memory had remained a source of deep sensitivity, one that had been carefully protected from the scrutiny that continued to follow her. Now, with the contents of her letter exposed to the public, that carefully constructed image was under attack. The letter, which had been written by Diana in the mid-1990s, revealed a side of her that many had not seen before. In the letter, Diana discussed her personal struggles with the monarchy, the media, and her marriage to Prince Charles, and her deep frustration with the constraints of royal life. Her words were filled with emotion and raw honesty, shedding light on the mental and emotional turmoil she had endured during a time when she had been seen as the people's princess. Yet, the letter also painted a picture of a woman determined to break free from the chains of royal protocol, desperate to escape the emotional isolation that had come with being married to Charles. For Charles, the public release of Diana's letter was a devastating blow. Since becoming king, he had already been under intense scrutiny, and the revelation of Diana's private thoughts added yet another layer of complexity to his reign. For years, the media had portrayed him as a man who had failed his first wife, and whose relationship with Camilla had been at the heart of the scandal that overshadowed the end of his marriage to Diana. Despite his ascension to the throne, the ghosts of his past continued to haunt him. The public's perception of his relationship with Diana had remained a point of contention, and the release of the letter seemed to confirm many of the suspicions that had lingered for years. The contents of the letter added fuel to the fire. Diana's words, particularly those that spoke of her sense of betrayal by the royal family, painted a picture of a woman who had felt abandoned and misunderstood by those she had once been closest to. Diana had written openly about the toll her marriage had taken on her, expressing deep sorrow over her inability to fully connect with Charles and the increasing distance between them. She spoke of the emotional and psychological strain of constantly being in the public eye, with little to no support from the very institution that had shaped her life. It was a candid, unfiltered look at the heartache she had experienced, and the media quickly seized on these revelations, amplifying the message to the public. But what made the situation even more complicated was the role of Camilla, Charles's second wife, and now queen consort. Throughout her relationship with Charles, Camilla had faced public criticism, with many still viewing her as the woman who had torn apart the royal family. The letter's release added yet another dimension to her already fraught position. In her written words, Diana had not only alluded to her growing disillusionment with Charles, but she had also discussed the emotional toll that the public's fixation on her marriage had caused. Camilla, who had long been the subject of public scorn, found herself once again caught in the middle of the royal family's mess. From the outset, the letter's revelation had threatened to undermine the monarchy's carefully curated image. The public reaction was immediate and intense. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, dissecting every word of Diana's letter and offering expert opinions on its significance. The letter was seen by some as a vindication of Diana's experiences, a confirmation that she had been wronged by both her husband and the royal family. To others, it was seen as an unwelcome reminder of the royal family's dysfunction, a glimpse into a dark chapter that many had hoped would remain in the past. The reaction inside Buckingham Palace was no less intense. Prince William and Prince Harry, the sons of Diana and Charles, were left to navigate the fallout from their mother's letter. For William in particular, the letter's contents were especially troubling. As the future king, he had always been expected to maintain a public image of unity and strength. However, the revelations about his father's marriage and the emotional turmoil Diana had faced cast a shadow over his own relationship with Charles. The two princes had already experienced significant strain in their relationship with their father, and now, with the release of the letter, the cracks in their bond were only deepened. William, known for his calm demeanor, appeared visibly shaken by the letter's contents. His public silence only seemed to amplify the sense of tension surrounding the royal family. Harry, too, was affected, though his reaction was more overt. The younger prince had long been vocal about the emotional toll that the media's treatment of his mother had taken, and he had often spoken about the pain he felt in growing up under the intense scrutiny of the public eye. The letter, with its candid depiction of Diana's struggles, seemed to validate his own feelings of resentment towards the monarchy and the media. As the days passed, the situation inside the palace grew more tense. Advisors and royal officials scrambled to formulate a strategy to deal with the fallout. Some were quick to dismiss the letter as a relic of the past, a piece of history that no longer had relevance in the present. Others, however, recognized the potential damage it could cause. There were growing concerns that the public's renewed interest in Diana's story could weaken the monarchy's position, especially given the ongoing tensions between Charles, Camilla, and the rest of the royal family. The palace was faced with a difficult decision. Should they respond publicly to the letter's release, acknowledging the painful truths it revealed, or should they remain silent, hoping that the story would eventually fade from the public consciousness? There was no easy answer. The monarchy had long relied on the public's trust, and any misstep could further erode that trust. Charles's reign, which had barely begun, was already being overshadowed by the ghosts of his past. Diana's letter had reopened old wounds, and the question remained, could the monarchy survive the renewed scrutiny it now faced? Outside the palace, the public's reaction was divided. Some people were sympathetic towards Diana, seeing the letter as a poignant reminder of the struggles she had faced. Others, however, felt that the timing of the letter's release was suspicious, particularly given the ongoing tensions surrounding Charles's reign. For many, the letter served as a reminder of the deep fissures that existed within the royal family, and they were left to wonder how these divisions would affect the monarchy's future. The media, eager to capitalize on the growing interest, quickly began to delve deeper into the letter's contents. They focused on the more inflammatory aspects of Diana's writing, particularly her references to betrayal and emotional isolation. Some outlets even began to speculate about the possibility of more revelations to come. Would other letters or documents surface, offering further insight into Diana's state of mind in the years leading up to her death? The media's relentless pursuit of the story seemed to ensure that the letter would remain a focal point of public conversation for weeks to come. As the crisis deepened, it became clear that the impact of the letter's release would be far-reaching. It was not just a personal letter, but a powerful symbol of the complex dynamics within the royal family. For Charles, the exposure of Diana's pain and frustration could not be ignored. For Camilla, the letter added to the public's already negative perception of her. And for the monarchy as a whole, the letter posed a serious threat to its long-term survival. The public was demanding answers, and the royal family was struggling to find a way to respond. The fallout was swift and pervasive. Within Buckingham Palace, tensions were at an all-time high. Advisors, palace aides, and royal spokespersons scrambled to formulate a response to the unfolding situation. They knew that in times of royal crises, silence could be seen as weakness, but a public statement could also open the door to further scrutiny. The royal family had always thrived on a carefully crafted image of unity and stability, and now that image was being shattered before the eyes of the world. The monarchy had been rocked by its own internal drama, much of it stemming from the very private lives of its members. But Charles's problems were not confined to the walls of Buckingham Palace. The public reaction was deeply polarized. While some members of the public expressed sympathy for Diana, viewing her letter as a testament to the pain she had suffered during her marriage, others took a different stance. Many felt that the letter only added to the negative public narrative surrounding Charles, exacerbating the sense that he had failed his first wife and let down the public who had once adored her. The letter's disclosure reignited public debates about the royal family's dysfunction and the ongoing legacy of Diana's death. It seemed as if the monarchy could not escape its past. Meanwhile, Charles's relationship with Camilla, his second wife, was also under intense scrutiny. As the queen consort, Camilla had been subject to criticism and speculation for years. Despite her relatively low-profile role within the royal family, her marriage to Charles had always been a contentious issue, with many seeing her as the person who had caused Diana's heartache. Now, with Diana's letter becoming public, Camilla once again found herself thrust into the spotlight, a situation she had not been prepared for. The backlash was harsh, with some members of the public and press casting doubt on her suitability as the queen consort. Her past affair with Charles, and the way in which it had been played out publicly, had left a lingering bitterness that the release of the letter only seemed to amplify. Though Camilla had long tried to distance herself from the drama of Charles's first marriage, the release of Diana's letter made it impossible for her to avoid. Diana's words were not just critical of Charles. They also painted a vivid picture of a woman who felt trapped, isolated, and emotionally abandoned by the very institution that was meant to support her. The media quickly turned its attention to the implications of the letter, asking what it meant for Charles and Camilla's future. Could the monarchy truly survive a second scandal of this magnitude? Would Charles's rule be irreparably damaged by his past actions? And would Camilla continue to endure public rejection as the woman who had once been vilified? The release of the letter also set off a flurry of speculation about the royal family's private dynamics, particularly within the younger generation. Prince William, now in his 30s and the future King of England, found himself directly impacted by the events surrounding his father. For many, the letter was a direct reminder of the strain between Charles and Diana and the unresolved tensions that had lingered for years. The younger prince had long been protective of his mother's memory, and the letter, with its raw and unfiltered emotions, seemed to confirm many of the sentiments William had harbored about his father's role in the breakdown of the marriage. For William, this moment was both personal and public. He had watched as his father's relationship with Diana had been played out on the world stage, and he had experienced firsthand the consequences of being a member of the royal family. His relationship with Charles had always been a delicate balancing act, with William trying to maintain a respectful distance from his father's monarchy, while also preparing for his own eventual role as king. Now, the letter's release threatened to deepen the emotional divide between father and son. While William had often been seen as the more reserved and politically astute of the two princes, his silence on the matter only seemed to add to the speculation surrounding his reaction. It was clear that the letter had stirred up old wounds, and as the world watched, many wondered how William would respond to the renewed scrutiny of his family's past. Prince Harry, always more outspoken than his older brother, was also affected by the letter's release, but his response was different. The younger prince had long been a vocal critic of the royal family, particularly its treatment of his mother. Harry had been candid in interviews about the emotional toll that his parents' divorce had taken on him, and the public release of Diana's letter seemed to reinforce the pain he had often expressed. Harry's reactions were deeply personal, yet they also mirrored the disillusionment many people felt towards the royal family. To some, Harry became a symbol of resistance, someone who had broken away from the monarchy's traditional image of unity and loyalty. The media was quick to pick up on this, with many outlets framing Harry's response to the letter as an indication of his growing dissatisfaction with the royal family's history. As the drama unfolded, the public's fascination with the royal family's personal lives reached new heights. Journalists and media outlets had a field day dissecting the contents of the letter, searching for clues and hidden messages. The public, hungry for insight into the lives of their monarchs, eagerly consumed every bit of information they could find. For the royal family, this marked a new chapter of crisis management, one that required not just strategic communication, but a careful rethinking of their approach to transparency and privacy. The situation also raised difficult questions about the future of the monarchy. Could Charles, already an unpopular figure with certain segments of the population, weather the storm? Would the letter's release erode public trust in the monarchy and lead to an eventual decline in its influence? These questions were difficult to answer, but they were not easily dismissed. The letter had illuminated the deep divides within the royal family, and it was clear that these divides would only become more pronounced in the coming months and years. At Buckingham Palace, the royal family's advisors worked tirelessly behind the scenes to navigate the crisis. Internal meetings were held to discuss how best to address the public's growing concerns. Should they issue a statement acknowledging the emotional weight of the letter, or should they focus on reinforcing the institution's resilience and unity? There was no consensus on the way forward, and this indecision only heightened the sense of uncertainty that loomed over the monarchy. Outside the palace, the British public remained divided in their opinions. Some felt that the monarchy had been unjustly criticized, and that the letter was an outdated relic of a past that no longer had relevance. Others, however, viewed the letter as a powerful testament to Diana's courage and her willingness to speak out against an institution that had failed her. The monarchy's future, once so assured, now seemed precarious, with every move by Charles and his family under the microscope. Ultimately, the letter's release had done more than just stir up old memories. It had reignited a fierce debate about the role of the royal family in the modern world. Diana's words, once thought to be private, had become a catalyst for change, forcing both the royal family and the public to confront uncomfortable truths about the past, the present, and the future of the British monarchy. The consequences of her letter's exposure were far-reaching, and its effects were likely to reverberate for years to come. The royal family would need to carefully consider how to navigate this new reality, where the lines between public and private were increasingly blurred, and where the past continued to shape the future. As the weeks passed following the dramatic exposure of Diana's letter, the royal family struggled to regain control of the narrative. The ripple effects of its release continued to echo throughout the UK, and the monarchy found itself caught between a past that refused to be forgotten and a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. The letter, once a personal document meant only for a select few, had become a powerful symbol of the unresolved tensions within the royal family, and it was clear that its implications were far-reaching. Despite the monarchy's attempts to weather the storm, the question remained: could the royal family endure yet another scandal of this magnitude? And what would be the ultimate cost of Diana's revelations? One of the most significant consequences of the letter's release was the deepening rift between Charles and the British public. In the eyes of many, the letter was the final blow to any remaining illusions about the Prince of Wales's character. The public had already been disillusioned by his controversial marriage to Camilla and his tumultuous relationship with Diana, but the letter seemed to confirm many of their suspicions. Diana's words painted a picture of a man who had not only failed as a husband, but also as a leader within the royal family. In the aftermath, the media's portrayal of Charles was overwhelmingly negative. Many outlets, once sympathetic to his plight, now questioned his ability to serve as the nation's king. The public's perception of Charles took a serious hit, and his popularity, which had already been in decline, plummeted further. A once adored figure, beloved by millions for his charity work and his role as a father, now found himself viewed with skepticism and contempt. His every move was scrutinized, his motives questioned, and his ability to lead the country doubted. It was an image that would be difficult to shake, even with time. In public appearances, Charles appeared increasingly strained, his confidence shaken. Gone were the days when he could count on the admiration and support of the public. Now, he had to face the reality that his personal life, long hidden from view, had caught up with him. In contrast, the public's opinion of Camilla became more complex. The queen consort had always been a divisive figure, but her position was now even more precarious. While some people continued to express their support for her, especially those who had long seen her as the true love of Charles's life, others remained deeply uncomfortable with her role in the breakdown of his marriage to Diana. The letter seemed to put her under an even harsher microscope, as people debated whether she was complicit in the affair or whether she had been a victim of circumstances herself. For many, Camilla remained a symbol of everything that had gone wrong within the royal family. Despite her years of work to earn public acceptance, she could not escape the shadow of her past relationship with Charles. The monarchy itself was increasingly at the center of debate. The institution had long been seen as a symbol of stability and continuity, but Diana's letter called into question whether that image could still be upheld. Critics of the royal family pointed to the deep dysfunction within its ranks, the inability of its members to maintain stable marriages, and the continuous scandals that seemed to follow them. The monarchy, they argued, was out of touch with modern society, and its grip on the public's affection was slipping. In some quarters, the debate even turned to the relevance of the monarchy itself. Could an institution that had been so deeply affected by personal drama continue to play a role in the nation's future? However, amid the crisis, Charles's supporters rallied around him. hoping to salvage his reputation and the monarchy's future. They argued that the personal struggles of the royal family should not overshadow the work that Charles had done for the country. His charity work, particularly in the areas of the environment and architecture, was still highly regarded. In the years leading up to his coronation, he had become an advocate for causes that were ahead of their time, calling attention to issues such as climate change and social inequality. His supporters contended that his dedication to these causes should not be overshadowed by the drama of his personal life. Yet, despite their best efforts, the focus remained on the scandal surrounding his marriage and his relationship with Diana. For the royal family, the letter's exposure was a stark reminder of the difficulties that came with living under such intense public scrutiny. The royal family had long relied on its image of secrecy and privacy, but Diana's letter shattered that carefully constructed illusion. The letter revealed the vulnerability and humanity of its author, showing the pain and anguish that had been hidden behind closed palace doors for so long. It was a stark contrast to the carefully curated public personas of the royals, who were often portrayed as paragons of virtue and composure. Diana's letter, with its raw emotion and personal revelations, laid bare the cracks in the royal facade. In the face of this public scrutiny, Charles and the rest of the royal family found themselves in an unenviable position. They had to balance their desire for privacy with the necessity of maintaining public support. As the crisis continued to unfold, the royal family began to take more public actions in an attempt to stabilize the situation. Charles made a series of public appearances, seeking to reassure the public that he was still capable of leading the country and that he would continue to support the causes he had championed for years. He even addressed the controversy in several interviews, trying to explain his side of the story and to show that his personal life should not detract from his public duties. But despite these efforts, the damage was done. The trust that had been lost could not be easily regained. At the same time, the letter's release had brought a renewed focus on Diana, the late Princess of Wales. Her legacy, once defined by her charitable work and her tumultuous marriage, was now being reassessed in light of the newly revealed details of her personal life. The letter gave new life to the narrative of her struggles within the royal family, and it painted her in a new light, as a woman who had endured much more than the public had realized. Her voice, though silenced by death, had found a new way to speak, and it resonated deeply with many people. Diana's courage in revealing her feelings and her willingness to speak out against the monarchy, which had long been seen as the pinnacle of British society, was viewed by some as an act of defiance. To others, it was a tragic reflection of her pain. The media, ever eager to capitalize on a scandal, continued to pore over the details of the letter, speculating on its meaning and its implications for the future of the royal family. Some outlets focused on the emotional weight of Diana's words, while others took a more cynical approach, pointing to the letter as just another piece of royal drama. But as the story unfolded, it became clear that the consequences of the letter's release were more profound than anyone had initially anticipated. The monarchy, once seen as an institution above reproach, was now under intense scrutiny, its future uncertain. As the months went by, the royal family worked to put a lid on the crisis, but it was clear that the monarchy had changed. The exposure of Diana's letter had forced both the public and the royal family to confront uncomfortable truths about the past. The cracks in the royal facade had been exposed, and there was no going back. What had once been a private matter was now a public spectacle, and the consequences of that exposure would continue to shape the monarchy for years to come. The royal family, once a symbol of unity and continuity, now found itself in a new era of vulnerability and uncertainty.